Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to SO Live. And before we get into the bulk of the conversation of today, I've got a question for you, Anthony Joshua. Who do you think you are? Because despite having, most people would say, a larger ooter than Carl Froch, despite having more fake friendships than Frank Warren, despite being far more disrespectful than Tyson Fury, despite far fewer accomplishments, I seem to be the one person in and around boxing that you're not currently beefing with. I'm not sure what I've done wrong, Anthony. Ant, can I call you Ant? No one ever calls you Ant for some reason. Talk about that on another episode, perhaps. But I don't take this disrespect lightly, as I know you don't. But we'll get into it. We'll get into it here on SO Live. And I'm joined, as you can see, not this week by Mr. Eamon Khan, who's mixing with the likes of KSI over at the Misfits presser, but a more than adequate replacement in the lean Josh Green. Josh, how you doing?
Very well. I'm pleased to see that the nameplate's been changed from Eamon Khan to Josh Green this week. Obviously, in my previous episodes, I have been Eamon Khan Mark II, but officially Josh Green this time. So delighted that I'm getting the respect I deserve.
Well, it's because we've had an upgrade, I should say, on the producer front as well. We've got our director of production. We've got a director in the house, or two directors in the house, I suppose, technically. Director in the house in Frank Trevitt, Modfather Frank this week. Modfather Vinny is at the aforementioned KSI press conference in that there London. So good luck to them. But we've got the A team here. Never mind. I don't know who's BA and who's Hannibal, and another reference that will get lost on a lot of our younger viewership. However, we have got a class lineup here today. Forget England, even though they've limped through to the quarterfinals, not the semi-finals, as the Metro erroneously put in their newspaper this morning. But yeah, my Metro gripes could be a whole segment in themselves. So we'll move on quickly from that. We are SO Live, the most interactive show on boxing YouTube. So please do give us a thumbs up. Do give us a subscribe. I see Thunder Road is in the chat already, so he'll be encouraging you at various intervals to get going with those thumbs up. But also, yeah, give us a subscribe if you haven't already, and get your questions and comments in. We'll go through as many of those as we can in the time we spend online. But we are talking predominantly about AJ and the fact that he seems to be at war with everyone at the moment, a war on many fronts for our poor Anthony Joshua. Ant, as I'm now going to call him. I've not got the okay yet, but I'm sure he will agree if we ever speak again, which is looking less likely by the second. But yeah, he had the much publicised spat with Carl Froch, something that's gone on kind of on a more low-key level for quite some time after AJ left their former trainer, Rob McCracken. But he's also had a pop at Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn for their so-called fake friendship. He's had a go at Tyson Fury, probably no real surprise there, about disrespecting Usyk. Says he's never going to be undisputed, not going to beat Usyk anytime, any place. So definitely not on December 21st. And also, he's had a physical go, almost, at Daniel Dubois, my poor namesake, who will not be intimidated. Just like all Dannys, we won't be intimidated. Although I think if AJ was coming at me like a freight train, I might cower in the corner, to be honest. So fair play to Daniel Dubois for standing up for himself. Although, as Frank Warren and many others have pointed out, he did kind of start it. But we'll get into all of that. But let's have a look what the chat's saying before we do. There's a few on here. Let's have a look. Carl Froch, what time do you call this? Says DB Cooper 1. Ash Barr says, say it how it is, Carl. I mean, I'm not Carl. I've just got a big nose. To be fair, my nose has always been bigger than Carl Froch's, even before the surgery. Yeah, he has admitted to having a nose job, hasn't he? I think I'm not like breaking any rules there. But yeah, do you know what? I've got just indulge me for a second. Brief Carl Froch anecdote. So the first time I ever interviewed Carl Froch in person, it was for Fighting Fit, short-lived sister magazine to Boxing News, which I think I was like assistant editor at the time. And I went in there that was it. He was showing us how to throw the perfect uppercut. So I was posing as his kind of hapless sparring partner for the shots we took. I'm sure someone's got a copy of that out there somewhere. Very embarrassing stuff. I think I might even have a copy somewhere. But he was showing us different types of uppercuts he throws. And we were just sitting there waiting for the photographer to set up. And he kept glancing over at me, looking back, glancing over, looking back. His mum turned up later, completely unconnected part of the story. But we can talk about that another time. And so did Rachel, actually, his then girlfriend, now wife. But again, not connected with the point of the story. But he kept looking over, looking back. And he said, have you ever played football? And I said, what do you mean? Obviously, I've played football. Yeah, I'm not very good. He said, but you're not like, you don't play regularly. You haven't like been playing football your life. What about rugby? I said, no, not a big rugby person either. So he looked again, looked back, looked back. He said, what about weightlifting? Do you do much weightlifting? I said, no, Carl, like, where's this going, mate? Because obviously Rachel hadn't turned up at that point, so I started to get a bit worried about his intentions. And he said, you've got the biggest thighs I've seen in my life. So I'm not going to do the accent. I can't really do East Midlands. But yeah, he was absolutely stunned by the size of my thighs. Thunder thighs, as I was later known on Twitter for a brief period. Thankfully brief. But yeah, Carl Froch, hugely impressed with my thighs. Haven't really spoken much since. Is there a connection? Perhaps there is. Anyway, have you fallen out with AJ, Mr. Flexen? Is he giving you the Dev Siney cold shoulder, says DB Cooper 1. Not as far as I'm aware, although now I've started to refer to him as Ant. That may still happen. Robert DaCosta, Froch is trying to ride on AJ's back because he's so irritatingly irrelevant. Sad, really. Furat Arslan, probably not the real one, says get on his levels first. Ikramudin Zwain says Snaky Froch. He's not called Cobra for nothing. Lord Hybrid says cannot wait to see Danny dominate AJ. I hope we're talking about the same type of dominate there, Lord Hybrid. Furat Arslan also says build up will be funny. Both Dubois and AJ don't come across as the most natural. It was a weird overreaction from AJ. Was he overcompensating, or does he get like this when he thinks he's the alpha in the room? Robbie Evans, Dubois aura dropped through the floor after AJ stood up. Think he realised silly fake fight talk will probably land AJ up at his gaff. Yeah, the old AJ coming out ready to turn up at Dubois' door, perhaps. Matt McKimmey asked, is Cole turning into a troll? I mean, I think Cole does, a certain amount of trolling anyway to get more views and more notoriety for his brilliant, I must say, Froch on Fighting podcast. I certainly don't agree with Froch on everything, including the shape of our planet, I'm sorry to say. However, he is always good value and great entertainment. DB Cooper 1 says, it's just hard to take Froch seriously now that he has a YouTube channel. Profits of negativity, clickbait, and beef. That sounds like a great album title to me. Negativity, clickbait, and beef. He's becoming a bully with a loyal cult like a politician. Thunder Road says there tends to be a correlation between big thighs and a big bunda. Well, Thunder Road, I can neither confirm nor deny, but I've not had any complaints about the thighs or any other part of my anatomy any time recently. That's as far as I'm willing to go on that. Josh, you've followed AJ, not literally, for a long time, and you know plenty about Carl Froch as well. What did you make of their... I suppose they already fell out previously, but what did you make of the public nature of their spat?
I guess from a fighter's point of view, I was surprised to see the way it came out. But as you mentioned, with Froch's now notoriety in media, whether it be his podcast or on YouTube as well, he's certainly trying to drive more people towards that, and that has become really the sort of just the way he's going with things. So there was no surprise that's the way he decided to take the conversation. Whether AJ knew or not that was the way the Froch would go is we do not know that, but no surprise that he's put that online. Given what we've seen over the last couple of years from Carl Froch and since he retired, and the obvious relationship with AJ, which does seem to be slightly frayed to say the least. So a little bit disappointing, I think, that a former fighter has done that. I spoke to Joe Laws earlier, who's obviously been in plenty of spats himself, and I think he was
spat expert, isn't he? Yeah,
he certainly is. But as a fighter, why would you do that? I mean, being in the media, you can see why Froch would do it. But if he was still fighting, and if someone from the media was to put out private messages, I'm sure he'd be pissed off, wouldn't he? So, look, I mean, he's going to do what he's going to do to get some traction for his podcast and his media, but not the way I would have gone about it.
As anyone that knows me or has known me for long enough will attest to, I hate the idea of anyone putting out private messages on a social media platform. Absolutely hate it. Ruins lives, you might say. And there's people out there just do it with no compunction. Don't know what you want to say about people like that. But if karma's a thing, perhaps they'll lose a fight or something, or get cut in their follow-up. Who knows? I'm just gassing on here. Gary says this will be interesting. I'll just be observing here, Danny. Thanks for letting me know, Gary. Sounds a bit creepy, actually. Gary also says, after saying he's just observing, 3 chats later, Gary's back. Is this Josh Hart, who Johnny Nelson told him that Dubois was disabled? God, I must have missed that one. Nelson gets a free pass in everything he says. It's not Josh Hart, it's Josh Green, lean Josh Green. Josh Hart is currently working on some content around the Johnny Fisher fight week, which he'll be attending. But yeah, I'll have a word with him about keeping old Johnny Nelson in check. Not good enough. Not good enough. What? No, I'm joking. I'm sure it's fine, but yeah, I'll have to watch that one back. For Arslan, would have thought after earning hundreds of millions, AJ would have matured enough not to flex a couple of £100 and rolls. Augustus Berg says AJ's by far the greatest heavyweight. Only haters would say otherwise. Greatest heavyweight what? Ever around today? I mean, he's lost twice to Usyk, who's still a heavyweight. So it's kind of hard to justify that. Little Crypty Monster says AJ's my hero. That's obviously fine. No problem with that. AJ McKen, AJ's private text messages aren't private at all. Yeah, wasn't it? Didn't we see that thing about Eddie Chambers years ago? What was it? Real Ones Move in Silence, where he's basically slagging off Eddie Chambers. But he's never confirmed nor denied whether it was him or whether it was someone pretending to be AJ that sent it. But it was so random. Like Eddie Chambers wasn't even in line to fight AJ. I think he'd just been critical of him. And Joshua decided to have a pop at him, allegedly. Which I love. I use Real Ones Move in Silence all the time now as well. So I can thank you for that, Ant, my mate. IQ Boxing Academy says, good work, guys. See, IQ, is that our friend in Wembley? Or is that a different IQ? I have to find out. Xavier Miller. Zav, is that you? Let us know. Eight. Oh, no, I'm not doing this again. Beautiful Golden Dragon, as you will now be known. Is that Grey Dad guy's son? Probably around the right age to be my son if I'd started young. And I am from Tower Hamlet, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But no, there is no paternity dispute around Josh Green, as far as I'm aware, and I'm certainly not involved in it. Did anyone notice the date on the text? August 2023 says Paul Daniels. Paul Daniels, it's magic. Where's the lovely Debbie McGee? If you didn't get the earlier old-time references, you'll never get this one. IQ Boxing Academy. Yes, it is Zav Miller. Zav, welcome. Zav's obviously a great trainer and also someone who we've had the pleasure of hosting on our watch-along as well. So, yeah, thanks for joining us. We've already established I'm not Josh Green's dad. It's not August 2023 either. I'm not sure what that's about, from Paul Daniels, famous magician from the 80s, for people who didn't get the reference. But yeah, going back to AJ against Froch, we know Froch's motivation, Josh. Obviously, as you said, he wants to get more views, or I said wants to get more views for his podcast, and he's a figure in the media now. There's also the long-standing issue between them after AJ left the Rob McCracken stable. As far as we know, Froch remains close to his former trainer. But what's Joshua's motivation for engaging with it? Why can't he treat Froch just as another, noise maker in the media industry and ignore them, be above it? Why does he want to engage with it?
It's a difficult one to know. I don't know where the loyalties lie in terms of McCracken. I'm not sure what AJ's relationship was like with McCracken once he left. Obviously, the performances were going downhill. They weren't where they once were. But whether they left on a sour personal note remains to be seen. Maybe we'll find that out a little bit later in AJ's career. I can't imagine McCracken's going to be one that's going to let that slip. Obviously, pretty elusive when it comes to interviews is Mr. McCracken.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it all seemed very personal to me, just looking at the messages that came through from both. Obviously, it is from Froch's side, and yeah, whether if you want to treat him as an outsider, somebody who's making criticism, you can do it that way. But at the end of the day, there is a pre-existing relationship between AJ and Froch, and I'm sure that played into it. I'm not sure when they last met in person, whether there was anything said, what sort of terms they're on. But you've got to think if they're not on good terms in person, then it would probably translate to the messages.
All right, well, we're going to go back to the chat in a minute, but I want to get our poll out nice and early. So we're asking basically right now, so if AJ's career ended tomorrow, for example, I mean, it's not going to, but if it did, who has got the better all-time record? Who's higher in your all-time boxer list. Is it Joshua? Is it Froch? Let us know. Joshua, obviously two-time world heavyweight champion, bidding to make it 3 against Daniel Dubois on the 21st of September. Froch, many times super middleweight world champion, and been in with some of the top fighters of his era as well. That famous win, revenge with George Rose at Wembley as well. And who's higher in the all-time list right now? Froch to the chat. DB Cooper 1. Froch is just mad that Rob McCracken with his 10% made more from AJ in a few years than Froch did in his whole career. Holdar says Froch is trying to keep his name alive. Little Crypty Monster says Froch threatened to release more AJ messages. Not a cool move. Chris Watkins, Froch moans about everything. I don't know about it. Does he moan about everything? Ferrat Arslan says, should Dubois come out southpaw first round? That's a kind of attempted dig there at our friend Xavier Miller after Dillian Whyte against Tyson Fury, but I would maintain that was easily Whyte's best round of that fight. Tactics TV says Carl Froch is from the past and is the past. All glory to the Lord, God the Son, Jesus Christ. I'm afraid as much as, I'm a God-fearing man, that name's going to get shortened if you send any more chats. 1-2 for the AJ crew. Can't wait for AJ to dominate Daniel Dubois. We don't call him AJ anymore, just so you know. Don't matter what AJ does, he's always got snakes poking knees. How would a snake poke? That's a hell of an image. Gary, Joy blame McCracken for quit against Ruiz, and you call Froch a hater. Carl Froch is Hall of Fame. For our Froch has better wins, better quality opposition, in my opinion. Realistically, probably Froch, but the heavy roots don't they? Certainly do. This is Gary, who was just observing. It's about fish out already. Says if the AJ fans use their resume and top win logic, then Froch should get 100% in the vote. He's some kind of crazy eyes emoji, which is fun. Thanks, Gary. Continue, Irvin. Such or Joshua, but Froch is not the only person to. Daniel Dubois was obviously the key figure who got a bit of, although it came close. In their sit down, we were all very excited to watch that. There's an interview up on the channel at the moment with man in the middle in that scenario. Adi Oladipo, the mediator of the face-to-face interview with Joshua and Dubois. He said there's absolutely no chance scripted or staged anyway. As soon as Dubois claimed wasn't intimidated and said, who do you think you are? AJ Twitch flicked in Joshua, and it very nearly went off. Josh, when you first saw that, either on the it's still not been released in full, I don't think, but when you saw it on social media, what do you think?
Yeah, I was surprised to see the attitude from Daniel Dubois. I think it is a show of confidence in himself. He's got from the wins over Miller and the win over Filip Hrgovic as well, and I wouldn't say it's a change. It's definitely not a major change in attitude with Daniel Dubois, but you've seen these slight changes, and a lot of that has to go down to Don Charles. He's done an excellent job with Daniel Dubois, not just in the ring and training wise, but for his mentality as well. He looks a much more confident fighter, a much more confident man in the ring, and he's starting to become himself a little bit more. You would say in the press conference situations, I don't think he's ever going to be someone that's going to engage in a back and forth war of words. But Daniel Dubois we're starting to hear a little bit more from him. He had that little bit of a back and forth with AJ, and you know what? That's really going to build the fight. It caused a lot of comments online on social media. We've obviously done a number of interviews surrounding that. Our chat with Ade did really, really well. And I think a lot of people were interested in his opinion as being someone that was in between the two fighters at the time. In terms of my opinion on it as such, I think the advantage probably still lies with AJ in terms of these verbal wars, but I don't think it's going to play a huge part in the outcome of the fight. None of them are massively into the mind games side of things. They're not going to try and get in each other's heads massively as someone like Fury would. He's obviously an obvious example, but yeah, it was just great to see a bit of entertainment in the lead up to the fight. Really, we're still a number of weeks away, and I think it will build nicely, and things like that certainly don't do any harm.
IQ Boxing Academy, our friend Xavier Miller says, I guess it's best to compare who had the best win out of Joshua and Froch. I mean, these are two fighters that are not known more for their defeats, but certainly fought the better class of opposition in their defeats than their wins. So Froch obviously lost to Kessler, which was avenged, and Andre Ward, who's one of the best fighters of his generation, one of my favourites as well. And then you've got AJ lost to Usyk back-to-back, and to Ruiz, which was avenged. So, I mean, it's tough. What's AJ's best win, do we think? Klitschko? I mean, he was certainly past his prime at that point, but got off the deck to do it against one of the best punchers of his generation. Is that Joshua's best win, consensus-wise? And then for Froch, is it the rematch win over Groves because of what it meant? Or is it the rematch win over Kessler because he was probably the best fighter at the time that he fought him? Was it the manner of the victory, in which case it would probably be Lucien Boutte? So, yeah, that's one we're going to have to work out who their best wins are first. But, yeah, please do help us out, chat. DB Coop 1 says, Froch's career is overrated, in my opinion. He keeps his name in the spotlight for this very reason, so he's not forgotten. I mean, to be fair, the 80,000 at Wembley, the manner in which the Groves fight ended, the rematch, will probably keep his name in the spotlight anyway. For Arslan, in terms of depth, as well as most times heavies aren't as deep as the lower weights. Robbie Evans says, people that say AJ was acting are mistaken, badly. Robbie Evans says, going to end up like Francis. Boxing Outlet says, Froch, ex-boxer becomes troll. Beautiful Golden Dragon says, anyone else notice that Grey Dad Guy's wall is the same colour as Josh's flat? Almost like they live in the same house and are related. I can guarantee we don't even live in the same city, never mind the same house. But it's a nice thought. It's a nice thought to have the whole of Team SO as one big happy family living in, living in some sort of kibbutz or something. Little Crypty Monster says, I liked and subscribed. Have a great day, evening, folks. You're not leaving us, are you, Crypty Monster? I appreciate you liking and subscribing first. Says, AJ has regained the eye of the tiger. Robbie Evans says, how many times did Dubois headbutt Phillips' right hand again? I think it was over 50 in the first 2 rounds, according to Billy Nelson. IQ Boxing Academy says, Don has definitely made a difference to Dubois. More belief, stronger mentality, looks better all round. Couldn't agree more. Jack Dutton says, I think people remember AJ versus Klitschko more than they will Froch versus Groves. That's an interesting one. I'm not sure that's the case. You know, I've got strong memories of both, but I think the way in which Froch Groves ended, and because the first fight was so controversial, I would think that was more memorable. But I could be wrong. Ferret Arslan says, Ames in the basement. Yeah, chained up. We ain't let him out for the live and to eat and drink if we're feeling generous. DB Coop 1, Dubois went from introvert to millionaire with a Brazilian bird and a yellow Porsche. Of course, he's a new man. Well, if anyone's seen our interview with Daddy Dubois, Dave Dubois, you will have seen said Porsche, amongst other very nice motors out in the drive. And Mod Father Frank, who I know is listening and running the show for us today, he was there too in his car. I think he forgive me for saying it didn't quite match up to the higher league motors that were out there, but we gave it a go. IQ Boxing Academy says, hi, Gary, the double jab at times would definitely be a tactic he should employ. So there you go. You're getting technical advice here on SO Live this week as well. So, yeah, so AJ's got into it with Dubois, almost physically. He's got into it with Froch, personally, I think it's fair to say, having a jab at his old Uta, as I said earlier. Got into it a little bit with Tyson Fury as well, basically saying he didn't deserve to win undisputed. He didn't take Usyk seriously in the build-up, and that's why he also didn't take him particularly seriously in the ring. That was his undoing. Says there's no way he can beat him. Josh, is this just sour grapes from Joshua and that he also lost to Usyk and he's never really liked Fury? Or has he got a real valid point there? Is the one of the reasons why Fury lost to Usyk his attitude throughout the build-up and the fight itself?
I certainly think he's got a point. Sour grapes may be a little bit strong, but in the ring, there was certainly some, I think disrespect is certainly a fair assessment of it. You look at the rounds where he was dancing around Usyk, he was lowering his hands. We know Fury does that anyway, but he certainly wasn't putting his foot on the pedal and getting the job done. And he paid for that later in the fight. I mean, if he'd have put his foot on the pedal in those sort of mid rounds, maybe we wouldn't have had what we had in the 9th round and onwards towards the end of the fight. In terms of the camp and the build-up, I think Fury took him seriously then. It was undisputed. I don't think it mattered too much who was going to be in the opposite corner. Fury was fighting for the undisputed world title, and that is something to take seriously. But as far as the fight goes on the night, yeah, I think there were certainly moments and rounds during the fight where Fury could have put his foot on the pedal. He could have taken Usyk a bit more seriously, and that's probably a fair assessment from AJ. And as far as will he or can he beat him on December 21st? Absolutely, Fury can beat him on the 21st of December. And I don't think it's something that we can quite judge yet until we get a little bit closer to the time. But Fury's got all the tools to defeat Usyk. It's just about carrying it out on the night, which is much harder done than said. So we'll see when we get there. But yeah, maybe a little bit of sour grapes from AJ.
Interesting. DB Cooper one says, one of the guys on the proper podcast was shouting out your stand bar interview, by the way, whole industry watch. Yeah, I've had a few calls and messages from people in the industry who did see it, mostly positive. Although there was a few off the record who said a few porcupines might have been told. I'm not sure what the proper podcast is. So DB Cooper one, if you want to let us know, who hosts it or what platform it's on and stuff, happy to give it a shout out if it's any good. Michelle says, Froch was a warrior. Joshua lost twice to Pussy Usyk. Oh, come on. From middleweight in London. Yeah, I mean, I think Pussy Usyk's a bit harsh. Say it to his face, Michelle. Clicker says, Fury can beat Usyk if he don't fall about in the ring like he did and don't have as many voices in the corner. I'm inclined to agree with that, Clicker. Jay Fernando says, I think Fury has a great chance of beating Usyk. There was misinformation in his corner because 3 people were talking. IQ Boxing Academy says, respect to both Joshua and Froch. Both got up from heavy knockdowns to rally back. Fura Arslan, Usyk is by far the best opponent Fury faced in almost a decade. Fury switched on enough about boxing to recognise threats. Fury ran out of ideas, couldn't pace. So showboat to save face and buy time. I'm not sure that's the case either. Fury did seem to be in the ascendancy when he started the showboating and the coasting, which was definitely a mistake. But I don't think he was running out of ideas at that point. I don't think Usyk was really putting the pressure on. Usyk seemed almost like a beaten man at that point. He wasn't, attempting as many attacks as previously. Maybe he was just biding his time, waiting for his second wind. But I don't think it was the case that Fury just simply ran out of ideas. I think Usyk's resurgence came at around the same time as Fury's showboating began. Uncle Proper doesn't need a shout out from you chaps. Hate to burst your bubble, Flex and lol. Thanks, DB Cooper. I was trying to do you a solid. I'll know better next time. Tommy Face says, Froch is only known by casual fans from when he started his channel. No one cares about Froch. He's also not known outside the small few towns in the UK. Wow. Ouch. I suppose on a global perspective, Joshua is the bigger star. I don't think anyone's doubting that. But it's more whether Froch needs to use AJ's name to get notoriety, because I believe his podcast was doing pretty well before this week's Ferrari over the argument between the two all-time greats, or British all-time greats, certainly. But yeah, so along with everyone else that AJ is currently warring with, he did have in comparison, a mild dig at his own promoter, Eddie Hearn, and former rival, now, do we say friend? Friend? I don't know. But yeah, Warren and Hearn, he said their relationship constituted a fake friendship, to which both men rebuffed it, although Eddie Hearn rebuffed it quite strongly. He said it was mainly because Joshua hadn't been around himself and Warren when they've been together and saw how deep, I suppose, their bond goes. Whereas Warren, when I asked him about it, said, it takes a fake to know a fake. So I had a little dig back at AJ, but also said they're not really hanging around together outside of boxing. They've got a strong working relationship. So kind of maybe agreeing with Joshua to an extent. But yeah, what do you think, Josh? You've been around both Warren and Hearn. You've seen it go from bitter rivalry to, working relationship that's producing some of the biggest fights that we all want to see. Is there a friendship there in your view? And are they trying to purport that there is, more to the point?
I'm actually inclined to agree with AJ to some extent here. Well, I think people sort of read into the word fake a little bit too much. They try to sort of display it as they actually strongly dislike each other, which I'm not sure necessarily is the case. I think there's a big difference between being friends and being enemies in this case, and I think maybe we know they're doing great business together, obviously over in Saudi Arabia, and that's gonna sweeten the deal a lot. So I think they get on from a business standpoint completely. And yeah, they have to spend plenty of time around each other. So yeah, they get on. They sort of enjoy that time in the boxing sphere, and they're both within that sphere. So yeah, they get on, but I don't think they're necessarily friends. Friends, in my opinion, is probably someone they hang out outside of boxing. If they just see each other at work, are they therefore friends, or are they just colleagues or acquaintances? So I think it's probably people reading a little bit too much into the word fake and trying to sort of recreate what we saw a number of years ago from Eddie and Frank, which we would absolutely love as a channel, but I'm not sure it's actually going to happen with all the money and all the big fights and all the shows that can be made on the line, unfortunately.
Josh, by your definition, that means you and I aren't friends.
Acquaintances.
I'm pretty crushed right now, colleagues at least. But I'm pretty crushed. This is awkward to have this on a public forum, but I always considered you a friend, mate. So let's get on with it. TC says AJ's best win is Klitschko. No one who Froch has beaten has Klitschko's record or legacy. So AJ clearly had the best individual win, although Klitschko was coming off that defeat to Fury, wasn't he? And a long period of inactivity. But in saying that, Froch's record overall is stacked and probably a little better. Jay, this is referring to our poll, by the way, if you haven't already voted. We're asking right now who's higher in the all-time list, Froch or Joshua. Jay Fernando says Usyk can always adapt, might take him a few rounds to work his opponent out, but he always finds a way. IQ Boxing Academy, Usyk is fundamentally the best heavyweight. It's not a case of Joshua or Fury not trying. Usyk has been at the highest level in the amateurs for longer than Joshua and Fury. Very true, but it did seem like Fury was having success for that 3-round block in the middle of the fight. And it's whether, without the coasting, without the casual attitude, perhaps, he could have continued that superiority. Robbie Evans says, Uncle Proper, who or what is this? I think it does need shouting out. Man's on your live feed telling you what he doesn't need from you. Jay Fernando says, Warren and Hearn are working well together. As long as they can put these fights on, long may it continue. Thunder Road says, Eamon is getting ready for the heavyweight matchup between Lukaku and Upamecano. I haven't been following the Euros perhaps as closely as I should have because I didn't know what that was. But yeah, I know Lukaku is, at least. And he hasn't scored a legitimate goal yet, I was reading this morning. Not good enough, Stormzy. Furra Arslan says, being able to concentrate for 12 rounds is a skill, and Usyk has that and exploits the lack of it in others. Certainly is. DB Cooper 1 says, AJ seems bitter that his Matchroom are no longer the number ones. He hates Queensbury more than Eddie does. 258 seem like divas to deal with. I mean, I've never had an issue with 258, to be fair, or AJ, and as I call him, without permission. Thunder Road says, chat hit the thumbs up. Danny pulled Woody from Toy Story as Eamon's replacement this week. Yeah, well, as he's no longer my friend, I'm going to go right in and agree with you on that, Thunder Road. But I guess that makes me Buzz Lightyear, which is even cooler. Boxing Outlet says Anthony Joshua has just made a huge investment in Matchroom Boxing as a major shareholder. Clicker says if Cole Froch was a heavyweight, he would destroy AJ. Froch ain't a man to be messed about with. He ain't feared of no one. Yeah, I didn't notice Froch offering it to AJ on the cobbles, though. So let's wait and see if that happens. That seems like an inevitable next step. The Reality Field says Dubois is going to retire AJ. AJ thinks he's the man after beating Valin and a wrestler with a 0-1 record. Don't start having to go at wrestlers, the Reality Field, or we could still fall out. Finn Sons Boxing says Froch has a great resume, but Joshua has some balls. You've got to give it to him. He will fight anyone. I'm sure Froch decided against a few fights in his time. Joshua don't seem like that sort of geezer. I don't know. I mean, Froch certainly could have had the rematch with Andre Ward. There was a couple of occasions where that was on the cards, and he admittedly said he didn't fancy it, presumably because, not presumably, he actually said that he felt the likelihood is Ward would outpoint him again in a boring fight. and he didn't want to go through a boring 12 rounds like that again, which is kind of a strength in itself to have that, security that you're willing to admit to that publicly. Whether their friendship, if it even is a friendship, is fake, it's an interesting one because you could barely do an interview with Frank Warren before this recent rapprochement where he wouldn't have a go at Eddie Hearn, even if you didn't bring Hearn up. Like, you get the various press officers they've had over the years, and they've all been great guys. Particularly Matt Rich, who's the current incumbent, and Darren Hanley, who I'm still friends with now, moved on a couple of years ago. But they'd all say to you afterwards, "Oh God, why do you have to get him talking about that? Oh, why has he gone on about Eddie again? It just seems like we're always talking about Eddie all the time." But you didn't have to encourage him. You didn't have to bring Eddie up. He would find a way to shoehorn him into the conversation. You could talk about women's boxing, and he'd find a way to bring Eddie Hearn into it. Oh yeah, women's boxing. Do you know who's a real woman? Do you know who's a real girl? That Eddie Hearn. Not comments endorsed by me, of course. I'm all into equal opportunities. But yeah, so it was always that. And now, even when you ask him about potentially controversial topics regarding matchroom fighters, Conor Benn's drug test issues being a recent example, Warren now goes out of his way to avoid talking about it. Now, it could be because he realizes how fruitful, how lucrative financially the current relationship with Eddie Hearn is. That might be a big part of it. Him, Hearn, Spencer Brown, and the guys in Saudi basically running the sport in Saudi and Europe, and maybe even the US coming soon with their debut show at the beginning of August. So you can understand why there's a motivation there to stay at least on the surface amicable. But whether they're actually friends or not, I'm not sure. I mean, have they got the wives together and gone out for a meal? I'm not sure that's happened yet. I think the closer relationship, perhaps, from what we've been told, is between Eddie Hearn and George Warren, who are obviously more similar in age. So that might have something to do with it. Perhaps that's why Josh and I aren't actual friends. Maybe it's the age gap. Those age gaps, relationships, they never work out. But yeah, they are getting on together. It is good for the sport at the moment. So I think that's a good thing. Whether they're actual friends or they'll be calling each other up on a daily basis, gabbing about the latest Euros match or episode of Coronation Street, I'm not sure. Josh and I don't do that either. I should just point out. But I've got to stop talking about us because it will get more awkward as we go on. Throughout Arslan says, what's the point of finally getting undisputed to less than 12 months later have IBF online against two fighters who've lost to the man being stripped? Finally have some clarity in the division. Yeah, but people often praise the IBF for being stringent on their mandatory obligations. So just because it doesn't go the way we want it to go, or it doesn't follow the logic that we'd like to see, I don't think we can then criticise the IBF for following their own rules, which we all praise them for, or most of us praised them for in the past. TC says, Froch didn't want a rematch versus Ward unless it was in Nottingham. Not sure that would have made much difference. It wasn't a close fight, although it went to the scorecards the first time. Bluz X says, AJ will KO Triple D. It's a shame Frank Warren has convinced him he beats AJ. But if Joyce batters Triple D, what does a big puncher do in AJ? Yeah, but Joyce, there was obviously the eye issue, wasn't there? That Joyce's jab was crucial in making that injury happen. You've got to wonder if Dubois will be a bit more conscious of Joshua's specific weapons and how to avoid them. We shall see. And he is certainly an improved fighter from the Joyce defeat as well. IQ Boxing Academy says, interestingly, we need Joshua versus Fury like we needed Froch versus Calzaghe. Finn Sons Boxing says, AJ was never offered the Wilder fight. The Reality Field says, AJ acting all gangster now, Dubois will check his chin. Just to reply to Finn Sons Boxing, having spoken to Joseph Parker, it's on our channel a couple of weeks ago, he was very much of the impression that Joshua Wilder was a done deal for September the 21st because he, Parker, was supposed to be fighting Daniel Dubois or Filip Hrgovic, the winner of that fight, on the same show. And it all went to pot when not only did Dubois beat Hrgovic, but Wilder lost to Zhilei Zhang. So I think if Wilder would have rejuvenated his career by beating Zhang, that AJ fight was all but signed and sealed. Raj Singh says, when will we ever see more Asian representation in referees? Bit of a left field one, Raj, but certainly an important point. I don't know. I mean, is it the case that I don't think there's barriers necessarily to more Asian people getting into refereeing. Certainly not in Britain, but is there massive influx or massive interest from the Asian population or Asian descent, population of Asian descent in becoming referees? I don't know. We've seen plenty of top-level Asian boxers or British boxers of Asian descent. Amir Khan, Adam Azim more recently, of course. So maybe that will be something that feeds in, and that's just South Asian, of course. So let's wait and see. But yeah, something I'd like to see more representation of minorities in many areas of the sport, including the gender split as well. Finn's unboxing Calzaghe and Froch can't be mentioned in the same sentence. Calzaghe is different gravy. For our Arslan, do you think this calls for female boxing on Riyadh carry weight? I'm not sure what that means. The shows are privately funded by Turkey, so obviously don't draw enough eyes. Should women's boxing have its own shows to really gauge interest? I think we've seen women's MMA in Saudi, haven't we, with Clarissa Shields recently, so I don't see any reason why you couldn't have a female boxing fight on one of the cards. I mean, surely a decent level female fight would draw as many eyes on the September 21st card. Oh, that's in the UK though, isn't it? I was going to say is the Chamberlain Padley fight, and it's a good fight. Don't get me wrong, but you know it's not got huge names on it. And Mark Chamberlain's been on a couple of the Saudi shows as well, and he's a very exciting fighter to watch. But a female fighter who's very exciting to watch could easily slip onto one of those cards also. I don't see why not. Let's get Ellie Scotney on there. She's very exciting fighter. The reality filter, Calzaghe likes his home cooking. At least the IBF sets mandatories, unlike the WBC. Liam 5 says Wilder will fight AJ, I think, or with fight AJ. I'm not sure exactly what he means there. Watch 2 Box says Joshua for his big fights and Froch did not have the balls to rematch Andre Ward. I'm not sure it was the balls. I think he just accepted the fact there was a strong chance he would lose again if it went to a decision. I think he felt that Ward was too cagey, too crafty to get that big shot on his chin and knock him out. Finn's unboxing. The only time Wilder fight was on the table, Joshua accepted it, but Wilder lost. Wilder was highly overrated. Tyson made him look better than he was. Gary, let's be honest, there's no real friends in boxing. There you go, Josh, you've got to get out there. Everyone gets used for money and YouTube views nowadays. It's the business, right? DB Cooper 1, Turkey doesn't rate women's boxing, and I respect that. We don't know that for sure. So many in boxing have the same views but don't express it. Personally, I like it, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. I don't think you can generalize like that, though. I don't think you can say, like, all women's boxing is the same, so you just don't rate it. I don't think it works like that. You can have, long, drawn-out chess match style fights. You can have, all-action fights. I don't think it's always the same. There's some women's fights that I've enjoyed and some I haven't. Same with the men. I don't think it's that simple. Finn's son's boxing. What's everyone's thoughts on Bruce Shoo Carrington? We haven't got time for that this week. Finn's son boxing, maybe in the future. Your reality filter. Let's be honest, boxing is corrupt as fuck. Came out of nowhere. Remember the judges almost gave Canelo the nod over Bivol. IQ Boxing Academy. Thanks, Zav. He says, good work, Danny and Josh. Colleagues can produce magic together, Zav. Finn's son boxing. Froch is a bottle chop. Jesus, everyone. The chat's getting brave this week. DB Cooper 1 says they had Ramla Ali in Saudi, countless UFC and female wrestlers, so clearly ain't a cultural issue. Turkey picks the cards, and many fans agree. Unless it's Katie or a Guo, it lessens the card. Not sure that's true. I think if it's a world title fight between world-class fighters and it's exciting styles as well, I don't think it lessens the card at all. We've seen low-level, or lower-level fights on there. It's not like every fight. Not every fight adheres to the old, it could be a main event in a different area ideal. Liam 5's asking our thoughts on Johnny Fisher. There's a segment on Johnny Fisher and the Copper Bosch. Hate saying it. The Copper Box card later in this episode. Furrer Arslan says at world title level, 10% of women's fights are worth watching. The only way you'd know that for Arslan is if you'd watched 100% of the women's title fights, which I'm sure you haven't. So that's the only way you know if only 10% were worth watching. Luke Pitt now wants our thoughts on Anthony Yard. Everyone wants our thoughts on people that we've not got on the running order, which is a bit of a shame. Maybe we need to look at the running order. IQ Boxing Academy says, what actually happened with Kane and Fiaz? No one really knows. They're not giving up much information about that, Zav, as it stands. Kane Baker, in his social media posts, has been quite vocal, saying that he's been offered bribes and he's got nothing to do with it and he's completely innocent. I guess the truth will come out, hopefully, at the end of the board investigation. We've got loads of chats coming through, but we do need to move on to our next segment. And we had a busy weekend of boxing action, although AJ was busy seemingly offering everyone out, and some of them willing to accept and some not so much. We did see some fights in the ring over the weekend as well. And while Teofimo Lopez was pretty disappointing in his points win over Steve Claggett, we did see a pound-for-pound contender rise even further up that list at the age of just 24 when he found a beautiful body shot to end the night, potentially the career, although we're hearing there might be a rematch. of Francisco Estrada. But yeah, great fight, that one. Josh, what did you watch of the weekend's action and what did you make of it?
Yeah, I've managed to catch up on Bam. You say 24 there. He's making me feel young, so I can't imagine how he's making you feel, Danny. Absolutely terrific performance once again from Bam. He's really becoming that pound-for-pound star that we expected him to become. And yeah, he's going to be rising up those divisions, as we know. Already a champion in fly and superfly, and the bantam move is probably not too far off now. Whether he does make it to, and they do cross paths with Inoue, we wait and see. I know I saw a couple of interviews from Eddie Hearn over the weekend. He seems to think that they might just manage to avoid each other. Obviously, Inoue is going to be moving up, possibly up as far as featherweight in the coming months and years. Whether Bam moves up quick enough to meet him at feather or possibly super bantam, you never know. But that is an absolute mega fight, a fight between two pound-for-pound stars waiting to happen, and surely one that would headline a card out in Saudi or a Riyadh season card over in the US or Mexico. But as far as the performance over the weekend goes, just another stunning performance to be a top-level operator. We know there's a rematch clause there if Estrada wants it, but having seen how it goes, and I think the decision was a lot wider than it seemed on the cards, I wouldn't be too sure that we will see a rematch there. And there's plenty more big fights for Bam to have if he does want to go up the divisions. So yeah, excited to see what we've got next for Bam.
Yeah, I called him Jose Estrada, and then I called him Francisco Estrada. It's actually one Estrada, but let's just call it. Let's talk about Bam some more because I don't get his name wrong, and it's only one syllable. But yeah, I thought he was excellent. I thought the only round he lost was the one where he got knocked down, and even that was a flash knockdown. Good punch, but good combination, fast combination that he wasn't expecting. But yeah, I mean, he looks like he's got all the tools. He's very much a complete fighter. I was saying to someone yesterday, the only real question mark is whether he can go up as high as super bantam or feather, and if he does one day in the future, whether Naoya Inoue will still be around those weights. I think they might just miss each other because of the age difference and the weight difference. But that's kind of a mouth-watering prospect in the lower weight divisions. I mean, there's plenty to keep Bam busy at super flyweight and above as it stands. But the thought of him going up as far enough as he would need to cross swords with Inoue would be amazing. Teofimo Lopez, obviously, we talked about or briefly in passing. And it's no surprise. I spoke to Liam Paro last week. He's the new IBF champion, of course. He wants a unification with Teo. There's other champions at the weight. Devin Haney's obviously become champion in recess. Alberto Puello is now the WBC champion. So perhaps we could see that. But is Teofimo Lopez on the slide, as some have said? I know he got challenged by another fighter who made that remark. Or is it more that he rises up and down to the level of opposition? Because the best we saw of Teofimo Lopez so far in his career has been against Lomachenko and Josh Taylor. What do you think, Josh? What's the problem, if you like, with Teofimo Lopez?
I don't think it's a problem about taking particular fights. You've seen the fights that he's taken in the past, and he's taken some absolutely massive fights. The Josh Taylor one springs to mind. Obviously, maybe the Kambosos fight wasn't as big as it seemed, or as it would seem if it was taken now. But I don't think he's got an issue in taking fights. Yes, I'm not 100% sure what the issues are. He's still fairly young. He's obviously got a lot left in the tank, but the performance over the weekend wasn't one that set the world alight. And I think to get those big names, to get those big fights over the line, you need to be putting on stunning performances, getting highlight reel knockouts. And that's the way that you can sort of set up these big fights and really bring them to the fore and get the attention they deserve. He probably didn't do that with the performance over the weekend. So I'd hope to see him out again soon, whether it's in a big fight or just a to get the momentum going a little bit more, and hopefully we can see Teo back in another big fight soon.
And just going back to the chat, just so you know, anyone who's just joined us or hasn't been with us long, we have got a poll up at the moment based on the spat this week or last week between Anthony Joshua and Carl Froch. Who is currently higher on the all-time list between Joshua and Froch? We will give you the result at the end of this episode. Who else have we got here? Paul Daniels, he got the joke. He said, "It's magic. What's your take on Turkey and Tyson's latest disrespect to Usyk yesterday? Keep calling Tyson champ and criticism of Usyk away filming. It was okay for Fury to fight an MMA fighter." I think it's just building interest in the rematch. I think if people just assume that Usyk's going to win on points again, it's not going to be as much interest. The whole drama, the whole excitement is whether Tyson can turn things around, isn't it? And as for Turkey, he seems like he's always been closer to Tyson than he has Usyk. Remember, Usyk signed with that rival Saudi group, didn't he? And didn't really come to anything. And then he's had to kind of come across to Sella and Turkey's group later on. Luke Pitt's asking about the thoughts on the price of beans in Aldi. One, I don't shop in Aldi. No, I'm joking. I actually do quite like Aldi for some stuff, but I don't like beans. Sad fact of life. I'm not a big fan of baked beans at all. The Reality Filter says Turkey is using Fury as the world's biggest porta potty, which is a horrible image. Timothy Rice says now Joshua and Fury have both lost and have no world titles. The fight ain't as big as it once was. I'm not sure. I think Joshua against Fury will always be a big fight, to be honest. Similar to Amir Khan and Kell Brook, very, very late in their careers. The Reality Filter is a fan of Branston beans, more so than Heinz, which I'm sure everyone was dying to know. IQ Boxing Academy says Bam is looking special, fun to watch, creative angles, good power. The Reality Filter says Tank versus Shakur needs to happen. DB Cooper 1 says the scorecards for the card were insane. Hearn needs to stop sending Brits like Ramla Ali into environments where they'll never get a points win. Even Bam almost got robbed. What the fuck? Insane. Raj Singh asks who is our favourite person to interview. So we'll answer that once we get to the end of the chat. Elijah Michael says you're the best interviewer I've seen. Jesus bless. God, I hope he's not talking about Josh. No offence, but you know, I want it to be me. Let it be me. Let it be me. DB Coupon says Teo Lopez is a testament to Bob Arum's ability to create a world champ out of nothing. Teo's career is lucky as fuck. I mean, he has beaten. I know there's question marks surrounding those wins or the form of the fighters he beat, but he has beaten good fighters. You know, even though when he first won the world title, he absolutely blasted out someone who was known for their durability going into the fight. So let's not be quite so harsh on Teo. I mean, you can be as harsh as you want. I'm not going to be as harsh on Teo. Favorite person to interview, Josh, as you're possibly the best interview Elijah Michaels has ever seen. Who are you going for?
We'll never know who's the best interviewer. Let's just say it's Eamon for now. I don't know. One of my first interviews for the channel was with Dave Allen, and I've interviewed him a few times since. He's always pretty insightful. I'd say very honest. He doesn't really pull any punches. He'd probably be up there. It's a difficult one. Johnny Nelson's always a good interview. Always really open and gives you plenty to go at. Yes, they're probably two that would be. Oh, Jai Opataya. I've had a couple of good ones with him. He's done me well over the last couple of months.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, there'll be loads and I'll probably miss people out. But in terms of like people I speak to regularly, I always like catching up with Sam Jones. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but we've got a pretty good rapport, so I enjoyed that. Obviously, Stan Dubois, Daniel's dad, Caroline's dad, he was excellent value. Really, really enjoyed meeting him and speaking to him. But for me, I think I should mention Tyson Fury as well. So probably the best interview I've done was one that ended up in print rather than on video. That was for Boxing News when he was preparing for the Klitschko fight out in a caravan. I mean, he wasn't preparing in the caravan as far as I'm aware, but he was staying in the caravan while preparing in the grounds of a huge house near Liverpool at the time with Peter Fury and Big John Fury, who'd only just come out of prison. So all in a cramped environment of a caravan. It was quite a big caravan, but that's a lot of big men to cram in. And then I was added, a photographer was added. And yeah, hilarity ensued in parts anyway. But yeah, that's still available on the Boxing News website. I hate to give a plug to what is now a competitor, but it's the only place you can read it. And it's still up there. I think it's called Tyson Fury, Life, the Universe and Everything, something like But yeah, so if you want to read that, not now, wait till the end of the podcast at least. But yeah, so more recently, the guys I've mentioned, but I always like speaking to the trainers more than anything. I like getting a trainer's insight into boxers' preparations, mentality, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. I've just got a keen interest in it. So the likes of Shane McGuigan, Ben Davison, Tony Sims, Mark Tibbs, Xavier Miller, Don Charles. I mean, I could go on, and I will miss people out, of course. Dominic Ingle, back in the day when he still used to speak to SecondsOut. There's loads. But yeah, always been the trainers for me. And then fighters I've looked up to myself. So Nassim Hamed, first time interviewed him. Andre Ward, people like that as well. Yeah, just loved it. And wrestlers as well sometimes. I interviewed Kurt Angle for an hour and a half the first time I spoke to him. And that was absolutely incredible. Although, as has lately been pointed out about the Standard War interview, similarly, maybe I shouldn't have believed everything Angle told me, according to other people. Phil Harv says, update on Yard. I mean, I did ask Frank Warren when I spoke to him a few days ago. He didn't have anything for me. Just pointed out they were planning Yard against Buatsi for the Wembley show, September 21st, which obviously is not going to happen now. DB Cooper 1 says, Yard is in Jamaica partying whilst dodging the biggest career paydays he'll ever get. That is unverified information. DB Cooper 1, Sam Jones sold me a dodgy used car. Report that man to trading standards. He does look like a dodgy used car salesman, I admit, and sound like one. But it's not one of those duck things, if it sounds like a duck, looks like a duck, etc. Nat says, Ben Davison must be hard to pin down for interviews. I've heard he's really outgoing. And then she quite rightly, because I was about to mention it, corrected her spelling of Davidson to Davison. So yeah, kind of undermined the point. Maybe because he's so outgoing, he's not a good speller either. Timothy Rice, now Fury and Joshua have both lost and have no world titles. Is their fight still as big? Yeah, someone made that point a few chats ago. I think like Amir Khan, Kell Brook, it will always be pretty big. Now, we've looked back over the last week, but it's time now to look forward because we've got what they're calling, I mean, it is the first headline act for Johnny Fisher, the heavyweight prospect from Romford, the Romford Bull. He's fighting at the Copper Box Arena in East London. East London, where I grew up, where John Fisher Sr. also grew up. From very similar areas, actually. We both grew up in Stepney. And we're both quite big lads as well. So maybe we've got more in common than you think. However, they're calling it, God, I hate saying it, the Copper Bosch Arena because of their much loved, maligned, bit in the middle, catchphrase. It is a big moment, though, in Johnny Fisher's career. He's kind of a throwback in that we don't see many fighters anymore who don't have that glittering amateur background. You've got Fabio Wardley. He had his white-collar background. Johnny was an amateur, both at home and at university, but quite an abbreviated amateur career. He was called Raw. Raw was like the adjective of favour for at least the first 2 years, I think, of his pro career. He's been working with Mark Tibbs throughout. His dad's obviously plays a big role in his career as well, managed by S-Jam. So originally with Sam Jones and Adam Morley, and then latterly with Shane Watson, taking over from Sam Jones. Just a very interesting story, kind of a fairy tale, as I say, a throwback. He's learned mostly in the gym, whether his own or travelling for sparring. He's been in the sparring ring with most of the top heavyweights of the current generation, including Tyson Fury, learning all the time. And I guess they now feel he's ready for, a decent opponent in Alan Babic. I don't think many people are picking him to win, although he's a great friend to the channel. And ready for the extra pressure that comes with being a headliner. Either that, or they just thought, well, he sells more tickets than most of our current headliners, so we might as well make him top the bill. Josh, what do you make of it and the fight to come on Saturday night?
I think it's a really fun fight. There's probably a lot of people out there that weren't 100% sure that Johnny Fisher was even going to make it to this level. I think the word you used there, raw, probably a fair reflection of his early stage of his career, but he's now in a position where he's sort of closing in on that British title level, probably a couple of fights away now, you'd like to think, from really putting his foot down and having a crack at that British title. And if he beats Alan Babic, which I expect him to do, he's very close to that. You'd expect Clark and Wardley to have their second fight, and then possibly the British title is vacant, and you've got the likes of Adelaide, Soldakers. Moses Atalma's probably going to be around that level if he wants to go for the British title. That might be a tough fight. Yeah, the size for Fisher is going to be a huge difference. He's a much bigger man than Alan Babic. We know what happened last time out for Alan Babic against Rosansky. Lasted less than a round in there for the Bridgerweight world title. And I think
the fight against Steve Robinson wasn't overly impressive either.
Yeah, I forgot the fight against.
Well, it was a forgettable fight. But
yeah, I love Steve Robinson, but it wasn't a particularly memorable one. Took a lot of punishment in there, did Robinson. I think Babic took a little bit as well in the early stages, but yeah, the size
took a bit as well.
the size is going to be a big difference, I think, and if he is able to land some big shots in the early rounds, I don't think it's going to last long. So, yeah, for me, a Fisher, probably inside 6, I'd say.
Yeah, you would hope so. If he's going anywhere near where they want him to go, you would hope he'll get rid of Alan, who we really like, but, he is a much smaller man and probably not in his prime anymore either when he was knocking loads of people over for Matchroom on those big shows. All glory to the Lord God, the Son Jesus. I said I was going to shorten that, didn't I? Glory to God. That's what you're forever known as now on this channel. People go on about Francis being a novice and Valin not being a great win. Francis beat Tyson Fury and Valin gave him hell. DB Coupon says, I heard Wilder might fight Lawrence Cody at Bridgerweight, which made me spit out my tea. Glory to the Lord says, we need to say how it is. Any fighters doing that good against Tyson Fury proves how good they are. Yeah. L. Lucan says, maybe Lord Lucan, although it's not spelled the same. Very clever, if so. Why doesn't Dominic Ingle speak to Seconds Out? It's a bit of a strange one. There's been no fallout or anything like that, and I've still spoken to him off line. But he said at one point, maybe about a year ago, he said he's only going to speak to channels that actually visit him in the gym, which I think is one of the reasons why he does a lot of stuff now with Boxing King Media, because they're local to Sheffield. But aside from that, I'm not sure, because we have had reporters in Sheffield since then and reached out and not had positive response. So I don't know. Ask Dominic Ingle, I guess. Maybe we pissed him off in some way. Although my article on his dad, Brendan, is still on the wall in the Ingle gym. I'm aware because Junior Witter posted something recently and there it was. So can't hate me that much, I guess. Maybe it's not me. I don't know. DB Coop 1. I can't talk bad about Fisher Jr. because Fisher Sr. is always in my Instagram DMs. No, it's not that. Saying, you've got an agenda against my son. Shut your trap. That was my best John Fisher Senior impression. Doesn't sound like that at all. All I said is he should fight Moses Italma. I mean, what have you got again? You have got an agenda against him. You're trying to make him fight Moses Italma. What's wrong with you? Oh, no. I want Johnny to develop at the right pace, and fighting Moses Italma now would not be good. Boxing Outlet says should be a good fight night. Thunder Road says all these interview names are not a single solo Prince Patel on this channel. It's by design. Prince Patel has been on the channel. I interviewed him with, who was he with at the time? Might have been Spencer Fearon, but I can't remember. But yeah, he has been interviewed on Seconds Out. But he was quite, from what I remember, because I was quite excited in a way about interviewing him because he's usually really outspoken, but he was quite reserved. So I was a little bit disappointed. DB Coupon, can't blame Dom Ingle, that's his porn name, for not talking to you Southern Nancy's. Yeah, I mean, yeah, what can I say? That's one thing Josh and I do have in common, whether we're friends or not. We are both Southern. Well, Josh, do you consider yourself Southern?
I don't know. I mean, if Midlands are a thing, then I'm in that bracket, surely.
Yeah, Stamford. That's where you're.
Peterborough way.
Peterborough way, yeah. East Anglia. East Anglian Nancy's doesn't have quite the same ring, especially not when you've got people like Jordan Gill and the Walsh brothers from there. So, yeah, all right. Well, Josh gets out of it then. I'll take the Southern Nancy mantle on, or millstone, as it might be. Yeah, I think it's Johnny Fisher's an interesting one in that they've had to match him quite carefully and slowly, similar to how they did with Conor Benn first time out, although with less pressure, because Conor Benn obviously had the famous father and was quite high up on matchroom bills and so on. But it's a tricky one because Johnny Fisher has got to be matched at a pace appropriate to his development. And although Mark Tibbs says he's now ready to, fight an Alan Babic. Does that mean he's ready to fight for the English title? Because he's obviously got the Southern area now. Is he ready to fight for the English? Is he ready to fight for the British? Looking at some of the names that are around there at the moment, you've got Wardley, Clark. We've already had some Moses Talma mentions in the chat. I'd be a bit concerned about him stepping up to that. And if not, who do you match him against? Because there's only so many fighters whose marketing ability at heavyweight outmatches their chances of winning. So you've got Alan Babic. Then who do you go for? Do you go for I don't know, who's the guy who's the American guy that bowled over on a Don King card, and he's been having back and forth with Fisher before? Josh, do you remember? Like, well known.
It's not Trevor Bryan, is it?
No, not Trevor Bryan. I thought you might think that when I said about bowled over on the Don King card, but no. I can't remember his name. He was giving mouth to all the British heavyweights before on social media, and then he fought someone relatively
Lovejoy or something like that.
Who?
Christopher Lovejoy. You remember him?
Yeah, Lovejoy. That's it. So do you bring over someone like a Christian Lovejoy, someone whose profile exceeds their abilities, and keep Johnny Fisher headlining against people like that for a little while? Do you bring over, who's the current version of a Kevin Johnson, or I guess Marius Vac? Who's got a big fight of his own coming up now, of course, as we saw recently. But maybe someone like Marius Vac, or maybe Kevin Johnson still fighting, I'm not sure. But someone who can guarantee giving him rounds, but quite negative, won't try too hard to win. It could be like, can he be the first one to stop him, or the first one, or stop him the quickest? That kind of route. It's interesting to see, because I wouldn't want to pitch him in if I was his management team with a Wardley or a Clark or even an Italma just yet. DB Cooper one's now going on about whether it's Stanford's in the Midlands or the North or whatever. But we don't need to go into all of that. So that's our take on Johnny Fisher, who will be at the Copper Bosh. It was Dean White who I was interviewing along with Prince Patel, not Spencer Fearon. Apologies, they look nothing like each other. Just not the same as Prince by himself talking about his journey and pitfalls, says Thunder Road. Prince Patel is welcome on the channel whenever he'd like to come on. He just needs to reach out to me and I will set it up, I promise. And I expect you to watch it from the road and encourage the likes and comments like you do on here. Timothy Rice is asking our view on the Dillian White situation. You'll have to be a bit more specific, Timothy Rice, if you want us to answer. And it might carry over to next week's episode at this point, because we have been banging on for a good 70 minutes now. And it has been a good 70 minutes. I think it's time for us to ask Mod Father Frank, if you can hear us, to please give us the results of the poll. We asked you right now, who is higher in the all-time list based on their accomplishments? Is it Anthony Joshua or his recent verbal sparring partner, Carl Froch? Got a whopping turnout, bigger than Rishi and the lads can expect for the general election. And Joshua with quite a commanding win, 68% of the vote say Joshua is already higher on the all-time list right now. I suppose if he loses his remaining fights, he could go down the all-time list. We shouldn't forget that. But it's more likely that he's got the upside still. So if he's already over Froch now, there's no hope for the Cobra, who trailed home with 31% of the vote. Thank you to everyone who voted. But if you haven't, please do let us know in the comments. If you're watching on playback rather than live, you've missed your chance to vote, but you can still tell us your views in the comments. Please do give us a thumbs up if you haven't already, and a subscribe if you haven't. But as anyone who watches this show regularly knows, the closing remarks always go to the co-host, whether it's Eamon Khan, Josh Hart, or in this case, my good colleague and not Hall of Fame promoter, Mr. Josh Green, Lean Josh Green.
It's been a pleasure to be back on, Danny. It's been a long time since I've been back on the podcast. I'm pleased that my name is now up in lights on the graphic. If you are missing Eamon Khan, by the way, he is at the KSI presser today. So I've seen a couple of interviews be uploaded to the channel. Whether they're live now or not, I'm not sure, but I'm sure they will be soon. So you can get your Eamon Khan fix there. My namesake, Mr. Josh Hart, will be down in London for Fisher Babic. So we'll have stuff from that from Thursday, I believe. So, yeah, good stuff coming up on the channel. Unfortunately, I'm homebound for the rest of the week, but I've got a few interviews lined up on Zoom. So they'll be with you as well. So thank you very much all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.